My name is Frank, and I've been a park ranger for over 20 years. I've seen all sorts of things in that time. Lost hikers, mischievous raccoons, and even the occasional black bear passing through. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for the day I came face to face with the Jersey Devil. It was a humid summer evening. I had just finished my rounds, checking the trails and making sure no one was doing anything too dumb out in the woods. You'd be surprised how often I've had to remind people that fire pits aren't for roasting an entire deer, or that skinny dipping in the middle of a public park isn't exactly encouraged. Anyway, I was on my way back to the ranger station when I noticed something strange in the sky. It was a low, dark shadow gliding through the trees, way too big to be a bird. I've seen owls and hawks in these parts, but whatever this was, it had wings wider than any bird I'd ever seen. I squinted, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. After all, it had been a long day, and I wasn't exactly young anymore. But no, the thing was definitely there, flying low enough that I could make out its silhouette against the last bit of light in the sky. Now, I'd heard stories about the Jersey Devil. Anyone who's lived in New Jersey long enough has. It's one of those local legends that kids talk about, and every now and then some excited tourist will ask me if it's real. I usually laugh it off, telling them the scariest thing they're likely to encounter is a family of skunks. But at that moment, as I watched this winged creature swoop down toward the trees, I could see its outline more clearly now. It had a long, thin body, leathery wings, and something that looked like horns or antlers sticking out of its head. The thing let out this screech that sounded like a mix between a banshee and a chainsaw. I swear, it was enough to make my hair stand on end. I stood there frozen for a moment, my hand still gripping the flashlight I hadn't even turned on. What was I supposed to do? Shine a light at the thing and hope it flew away? I wasn't exactly equipped for chasing down legendary monsters. Still, I wasn't about to let it get away without at least figuring out what it was. I'm a ranger, after all. It's my job to know what's in these woods. I decided to follow it, staying low as I moved through the underbrush. The creature seemed to be circling, like it was looking for something. My boots squelched in the mud as I crept closer, trying to keep quiet despite the branches snapping underfoot. Every step felt like I was getting closer to something I probably didn't want to find, but curiosity kept me moving. When I reached the edge of the clearing, I could see it more clearly than ever. The Jersey Devil, or whatever it was hovering just above the treetops, flapping its bat-like wings. It had a long, snake-like tail that whipped around behind it, and its glowing red eyes scanned the ground below. My heart was pounding so hard I thought for sure it would hear me. And then it did something unexpected. It landed. I could see its hooved feet touch the ground with an awkward sort of grace, like a deer learning to walk. Up close, it was even weirder than I imagined. Its head looked like a goat's, but with too many sharp teeth crammed into its mouth. It sniffed the air, twitching its nose as if it were smelling something nearby. I stood there in disbelief. This was no owl or bat, that much was clear. This was the Jersey Devil, in all its bizarre, mismatched glory. And the most unbelievable part? It was sniffing around like it had just lost its car keys. It was almost comical. Here I was, watching a legendary creature from centuries-old folklore, and it was behaving more like a confused dog than a terrifying monster. For a second, I wondered if I should take a picture, but of course my phone was back at the station. Figures. That's just my luck. I watched this thing for a few more minutes, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to run back and tell everyone what I'd seen, but the other part knew that no one was going to believe me without proof. I mean, come on. The Jersey Devil? Who would buy that? Finally, the creature seemed to lose interest in whatever it had been sniffing for. It flapped its wings a couple of times and took off into the sky, screeching once more before disappearing into the thick canopy of the pine barrens. I stood there, blinking, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. Should I report this? Write it up in some kind of official ranger log? Date, July 14th. Witnessed Jersey Devil searching for something in the woods. May have been hungry, or possibly just confused. No injuries reported. Yeah, that would go over well. By the time I got back, the whole thing felt like a fever dream, but the mud on my boots and the sweat on my brow told me it was real. I sat down at my desk, staring at the empty incident report form in front of me. I sighed, grabbed a pen, and wrote, "Strange creature sighted near North Trail. Unidentified, but appeared to be some kind of large flying animal. No immediate threat." And that was it. My one and only encounter with the Jersey Devil filed away like it was just another day on the job. Funny thing is, no one ever asked me about that report. Maybe they didn't want to know, or maybe they just figured I was tired and seeing things. Either way, I kept the story mostly to myself. Until now, of course. A few years ago, I had this strange, almost unbelievable experience while working as a wildlife photographer in a place called Sandstone Valley. By day, the park is absolutely stunning. Towering cliffs, a winding river, and endless blue skies. But when the sun goes down, well, that's when the place takes on a whole new personality. The shadows stretch out like long fingers, and the sounds of the forest seem to grow louder and closer. At night, Sandstone Valley feels alive in a way that's hard to explain, both beautiful and just a little bit eerie. As a wildlife photographer, I spend a lot of time in places like this, capturing the beauty of nature and documenting the animals that call these wild spaces home. I've been at it for years, and I've had some pretty amazing experiences. There's something magical about being out in the wilderness, camera in hand, watching the world wake up or settle down for the night. Most of the time, it's peaceful. But every once in a while, you get this sense that something's watching you. That's exactly what happened to me one night while I was out on a late shoot with my buddy Phil, who's also a photographer. Phil and I have been working together for a long time. We've shot everything from mountain lions to tiny field mice, and we pride ourselves on being able to handle whatever the wilderness throws our way. Our nickname around the photography community? The Night Owls. We've spent countless nights out in the field, capturing the nocturnal life of the park. It's thrilling work, and we love it. That night, though, was different. We were out near the river, hoping to catch some night shots of the local wildlife. The sky was clear, the moon was full, and we had our cameras ready. Everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly, in hindsight. As we moved along the trail, chatting about the best angle to capture the stars reflected in the water, I noticed something strange. And then, out of nowhere, there was this smell. It wasn't the usual scent of wet leaves or pine trees. No, this was something else, like burnt wood mixed with rotten eggs. I remember thinking that maybe a campfire had gone wrong somewhere, but there wasn't anyone else around. That's when we heard it. A low, deep growl. It sounded almost like it was coming from beneath the ground, vibrating through the soil and into our bones. Phil and I exchanged nervous glances. We weren't exactly newbies when it came to strange noises in the wild, but this one was off the charts. Before we could even decide what to do, a howl tore through the night. It was so loud it echoed off the cliffs around us. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a coyote. It was something else. We stood frozen for a second, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. My heart was pounding, and I could tell Phil was just as freaked out as I was. We'd never heard anything like it. Whatever was making that noise, we knew it wasn't something we wanted to run into. But curiosity got the best of us. As photographers, we're always looking for that perfect shot, And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, if we can catch whatever this is on camera, it'll be the photo of a lifetime. We moved toward the sound, our footsteps slow and cautious. The smell of sulfur grew stronger with each step. My flashlight flickered in the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows on the trees. That's when I saw it. Just outside the beam of my light, there was something moving. Something big, but the shape was all wrong. It was tall, lean, and fast. As we got closer, I saw its eyes. Glowing red eyes, staring right at us from the shadows. It felt like they were burning into my soul. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't like anything we'd ever seen before. Phil and I stood there, completely still, barely breathing. The creature let out another growl, so deep and loud that it felt like the ground beneath us was shaking. I could feel the sound in my chest, like my whole body was vibrating with it. For a moment, we were locked in a staring contest with this thing. It didn't move, and neither did we. I wasn't sure if I was more terrified or fascinated. Then the creature turned and bolted off into the trees. Its glowing eyes disappeared into the darkness, and just like that, the forest was silent again. No howls, no growls, nothing but the sound of my own heavy breathing. Phil and I slowly backed away, not saying a word. Our cameras were still in hand, but neither of us had even thought to take a photo. We were too freaked out. When we finally made it back to the station, we just sat there, sipping cold coffee, replaying the night in our heads. We tried to laugh it off, but deep down, we knew we'd seen something we couldn't explain. To this day, I'm still not sure what we encountered that night. Was it real? Or were we just letting our imaginations get the best of us? I don't know. But I do know that since then, I've looked at the park and the night differently. There's a lot out there that we don't understand, and sometimes the wild has a way of reminding you just how little you really know. And from now on, when I'm out on a nighttime shoot, I keep one eye on the shadows, just in case. As a biologist, I've seen a lot of strange creatures during my fieldwork. From the depths of dark caves to the dense foliage of the rainforest, I've encountered animals that many people would never imagine. But nothing in my experience prepared me for the salamander dragon. It all started during one of my routine research trips to the Pacific Northwest. I was part of a team studying the biodiversity of the region's forests, focusing on amphibians and reptiles. The area is known for its rich ecosystem, so we weren't surprised when we found new species of salamanders and frogs in the moist undergrowth. But one day, after a long trek through the woods, something caught my eye that was unlike anything I had ever seen. I was knee-deep in a small stream, carefully collecting water samples, when I noticed movement in the shallow water near a large rock. At first, I thought it was just another species of salamander. Its body was long and sleek, no bigger than my hand. But as I leaned closer, I realized this creature was different. The first thing I noticed was its skin. It shimmered, as though tiny scales caught the light, like a reptile's rather than the smooth, moist skin of most salamanders. The pattern of the scales wasn't random either. They formed ridges along its back, almost like the spines of a dragon from myths. It was the eyes that really startled me. They were deep amber, with a slit pupil that reminded me of a snake or even a lizard. Salamanders don't usually have such predatory features. There was an intelligence in those eyes, a sharpness that made it seem as though the creature was sizing me up as much as I was studying it. I slowly reached for my field notebook, trying to keep as still as possible, but the creature moved before I could jot anything down. With a flick of its tail, it darted across the water, much faster than any salamander I'd ever seen. I watched as it scurried up the bank, revealing another remarkable detail: wings. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but there they were. two small, leathery wings tucked neatly against its sides. They were so small that they didn't seem functional, certainly not for flying, but they moved ever so slightly as the creature scrambled over rocks and moss. It was as though the wings were vestigial, a leftover trait from something ancient, something not quite of this world. I scrambled out of the stream, keeping my eyes on the creature, determined not to lose sight of it. This wasn't just a new species. It was something entirely unique, a blend of reptile and amphibian that shouldn't exist. But here it was, real and moving before my eyes. I followed it deeper into the forest. The creature was fast, but it paused occasionally to look back at me, as if it wanted me to follow. The landscape around me grew more rugged, with towering trees and moss-covered rocks. The deeper we went, the more the environment seemed to change. The air grew cooler, and the vegetation became denser, almost prehistoric. The sense of entering a forgotten world was undeniable. Finally, the salamander dragon led me to a small cave, barely visible beneath a thick layer of ferns. It disappeared inside, and I hesitated for a moment before following. The cave was narrow, and the walls were damp with moisture, but there was enough light filtering in through cracks in the ceiling to see where I was going. As I moved deeper into the cave, I noticed something remarkable. Eggs. They were clustered together in a small hollow in the ground, each one about the size of a chicken egg, but covered in a translucent membrane. Inside, I could see small forms moving, each one similar to the creature I had been following. This was no ordinary nest. I was looking at a breeding site for the salamander dragons. The realization hit me like a wave. If this creature was reproducing, it wasn't just a one-off anomaly. There could be more of them in this remote corner of the world, hidden from human eyes. A species that had likely evolved in isolation for thousands of years, perfectly adapted to this environment. My mind spun with the implications. This discovery could reshape our understanding of evolutionary biology. The creature was a bridge between two groups of animals, reptiles and amphibians, suggesting a link that science had never considered possible. I carefully recorded my observations, taking photos and sketches, but I was careful not to disturb the nest. I knew that any interference could harm this delicate ecosystem. I had discovered something incredible, something that no one else had seen, but I also felt a deep responsibility. This creature, this salamander dragon, was a secret of the wild, a symbol of the mysteries that nature still holds. I live in a small town near the Everglades in Florida, where swamps stretch for miles, thick with trees and tangled vines. I've heard stories about strange creatures out in the swamps, but I never paid much attention to them. I figured they were just tales to scare people, or maybe to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods. But after what I saw that one evening, I'm not so sure anymore. It was late in the afternoon when I decided to take a walk through a trail that winds around the edge of the swamp. It wasn't my first time on that trail, but it felt different that day, like something was watching me. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The woods were quieter than usual. Even the usual hum of mosquitoes seemed softer. I was about halfway down the trail when I smelled something. It hit me out of nowhere, like a wall of rotten eggs and skunk spray. It was so strong that my stomach turned, and I had to cover my mouth and nose with my sleeve. I thought maybe a dead animal was nearby, something that had been lying in the sun too long, but I didn't see anything. That's when I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, just off the trail in the thickest part of the brush. At first, I thought it was a bear or maybe a wild boar, but as I looked closer, I saw it wasn't anything like that. The creature was at least 8 feet. The weirdest part was its face. Even though it was mostly hidden by the overgrowth, I could make out its features. It had a flat, wide nose and deep-set eyes that seemed too small for its head. Its mouth hung open, and I could see yellow teeth peeking through, like it was snarling or maybe just breathing heavily. But it wasn't like an animal's face. It looked almost human, in the most disturbing way. I stood there frozen, watching it as it moved slowly through the trees. It didn't seem to notice me at first, but then it stopped. Its head turned slightly in my direction, and that's when I felt a wave of cold fear wash over me. I can't explain it, but there was something in the way it looked at me. Its eyes were dark, hollow, and full of something I can only describe as anger, or maybe hunger. My body went stiff, and my heart started pounding in my chest so hard I could hear it. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at this thing, waiting for it to do something. But it didn't. It turned away and lumbered deeper into the swamp. The smell lingered in the air long after it disappeared. I didn't stick around. I turned and ran, not caring where I was going, as long as it was away from that creature. My legs felt like jelly, and my head was spinning, but I didn't stop until I was out of the woods and back near the road. By the time I made it home, I was drenched in sweat, and my stomach was churning. For the next few days, I felt sick, nauseous, dizzy, like my body was still trying to process what I had seen. I stayed in bed most of the time, too weak to do anything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's face, its hollow eyes staring at me from the darkness of the swamp. I thought about telling someone, but who would believe me? People around here talk about the skunk ape, but no one takes it seriously. They say it's just a local legend, something to entertain tourists or keep kids from wandering too far. But after what I saw, I know it's real. There's something out there in the swamps, something that doesn't belong, and it's watching us. The smell still lingers in my memory, that awful stench of rot and decay. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I catch a whiff of it, even when I'm nowhere near the swamp. I haven't been back on that trail since, and I don't plan to. Whatever that thing was, it's better left alone. I wish I could forget about it, but I can't. It's always there, at the back of my mind, reminding me that some things are real, even if we don't want to believe in them. The skunk ape isn't just a story, and I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe walking in the woods again. I moved into an old apartment in New York City. The building had character, tall ceilings, creaky floors, and windows that rattled when the wind blew. The rent was cheap, which was rare in this city, and I was excited to finally have a place of my own. At first, everything seemed fine, but there was an odd feeling in the air, something I couldn't quite explain. It felt heavier at night, but I brushed it off. Old buildings had their quirks, right? After settling in, I decided to do a little redecorating. The carpet in the living room was old and stained, so I figured I'd pull it up and replace it. As I peeled back the edges, I saw something strange beneath the floor, faint markings drawn in what looked like faded black ink. I pulled the carpet back further and found a large, worn pentagram covering most of the floor. It was cracked and faded, as if it had been there for decades, hidden away under layers of carpet. I didn't know much about symbols, but it instantly sent a chill down my spine. That night, the apartment felt different. The air felt almost suffocating. I kept hearing soft whispers, but when I strained to listen, there was only silence. The lights flickered every now and then, and no matter how much I adjusted the thermostat, the cold wouldn't leave. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. I told myself it was my imagination, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Over the next few days, things got worse. Shadows seemed to move in the corners of my vision, and strange sounds echoed through the apartment at night. Soft footsteps, faint scratching on the walls, and always those whispers. The pentagram on the floor seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't ignore. One night, I woke to see it glowing faintly in the darkness. Fear overwhelmed me. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. I packed my bags and left the apartment in the middle of the night, never looking back. To this day, I still avoid that street, haunted by the memory of what I found beneath the floorboards, wondering if it's still waiting for someone else.